The moment my mom hurled 3 crisp $111 bills at my face and snapped, "Get out. I'm finished paying for another man's mistake." I knew my 16th birthday would never be remembered for cake or candles. The money fluttered across the worn wooden floor like scraps of garbage. One bill landed beside my shoes, another drifted under the kitchen table, and the last rested against the family photo she had never bothered to replace after tearing my father's face out years ago. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked relieved. As if throwing me away was the final chore on her to-do list, my aunt stood frozen near the sink, clutching a dish towel without saying a word. My younger cousin stared at me with wide eyes, unsure whether to cry or run. The birthday cake from the grocery store sat untouched on the counter. 16 tiny candles still waiting to be lit. I felt every heartbeat inside my chest, but strangely no tears came. Not because her words didn't hurt. Because I had spent years preparing for this exact moment. For 16 years, she told everyone my father had died before I was born. Whenever I asked about him, she called him a coward, a liar, a ghost who abandoned us. Every birthday she reminded me that I existed because of someone else's mistake. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. Instead, I started collecting answers. Inside my backpack was a sealed envelope that had taken nearly 2 years to earn. Letters, official records, photographs, and one final document that changed everything I believed about my life. I calmly picked up the scattered bills and placed them on the kitchen table. Then I looked straight into her eyes, smiled for the first time all day, and handed her the envelope. "You should open this," I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. "I don't need another lie." I glanced toward the front door as 3 slow knocks echoed through the silent house. Knock, knock, knock. Without raising my voice, I took 1 step back and whispered, "The father you swear died. Just walk through the door. My name is Ethan, and by the time I turned 16, I had learned that some homes can feel colder than the streets outside. My mother never called me son. I was always the reminder, the burden, or someone else's mistake. Those words didn't leave bruises, but they settled deep enough to shape the way I saw myself. Growing up, I noticed how carefully she erased my father from every conversation. There were no photographs, no stories, not even a birthday to remember him by. Whenever I asked where he was, she answered with the same flat sentence. "He's dead." She expected that lie to end every question, but it only created new ones. I stopped arguing because arguing never changed anything. Instead, I watched. I listened. I remembered the details everyone else ignored, the nervous pauses, the changing versions of old stories, the way she avoided looking me in the eyes whenever my father was mentioned. People often mistake silence for weakness. They never realize that silence is where the sharpest observations are made. At school, I kept my grades high and my opinions to myself. Teachers called me mature, classmates called me quiet, and most people assumed I had accepted my place in the world. They couldn't see that every insult, every dismissal, and every lonely birthday became another reason to keep searching for the truth. I wasn't chasing revenge because I hated my mother. I was chasing the truth because I refused to spend my life believing a story that never made sense. By the time she decided to throw me out, she thought she had won. What she never understood was that the quiet kid she underestimated had already uncovered the one secret capable of unraveling every lie she had spent 16 years protecting. The weeks leading up to my 16th birthday felt strangely rehearsed, as if everyone knew a scene was coming except me. My mother became unusually polite whenever other people were around, but the moment the front door closed, the warmth disappeared. A sigh when she saw me, a disappointed shake of her head. A plate left unserved until everyone else had finished eating. None of it was dramatic enough for outsiders to notice, but it happened so often that it became its own language. Whenever relatives visited, she introduced me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "He's quiet," she'd say, followed by a pause just long enough to invite assumptions. Someone would joke that I looked nothing like her, and she'd quickly change the subject, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup before anyone could ask why. One evening, I found an old storage box in the attic with a corner ripped open, as though someone had searched through it in a hurry. Before I could look inside, she appeared behind me. Her voice stayed calm, almost gentle, but her eyes were sharp enough to stop me cold. "Some things are better left buried." She took the box without another word. That was the moment I stopped believing she was protecting me. She was protecting a version of the past that couldn't survive the truth. From then on, I paid closer attention. A whispered phone call that ended when I entered the room. An unfamiliar name scribbled on the back of an old receipt. A locked drawer that had never been locked before. Piece by piece, The silence around my father stopped looking like grief. It started looking like fear. Everything changed because of a single mistake my mother never realized she had made. The storage box she took from me that afternoon wasn't the only one in the attic. Behind a loose wooden panel, tucked beneath old blankets, was a smaller tin box covered in dust. It looked forgotten, but someone had once cared enough to hide it. Inside were faded photographs, a hospital bracelet with my birth date, and a bundle of letters tied together with blue string. The handwriting belonged to the same man who appeared in every picture holding my mother with a smile I'd never seen in our house. His letters weren't from someone who had abandoned his family. They were from someone desperately trying to reach them. One unopened envelope caught my attention. It had been returned to the sender years earlier, stamped with a forwarding address. That address led me to public records, then to a retired lawyer whose name appeared on one of the documents. I spent months after school making phone calls, asking careful questions, and piecing together a story no one expected a 16-year-old to uncover. The truth was simple, not sensational. My father hadn't died. He had never even known where I was. Every letter he sent had been intercepted, every attempt to contact me quietly erased before it could reach our door. That was the moment I stopped waiting for honesty to find me. I found my father instead. When we finally met, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. We compared dates, letters, and memories that should have belonged to the same family. The evidence matched too perfectly to dismiss. As my birthday approached, I made one decision. I wouldn't argue with my mother's lies anymore. I'd let the truth introduce itself. My father wanted to confront her the moment he learned the truth. I asked him not to. Anger would only give her another chance to twist the story. If 16 years of lies had taught me anything, it was that facts speak louder when emotions stay quiet. Instead, we prepared. The retired lawyer who had handled my father's original custody paperwork agreed to review every document again. He explained each record in plain language, making sure we understood what could be proven and what could only be suspected. We gathered certified copies of my birth certificate, returned letters, postal records, and court filings. Every page was arranged in chronological order, leaving no gaps for anyone to question. My father also requested copies of his employment records from those years, showing he had never disappeared overseas as my mother had claimed. Phone records, old tax documents, and signed affidavits from 2 family friends confirmed that he had spent years searching for me. None of it depended on opinions. It depended on evidence. While the adults handled the legal details, I handled something just as important: timing. I didn't post online. I didn't tell relatives. I didn't whisper rumors or try to embarrass my mother behind her back. I went to school, finished my assignments, and acted exactly as I always had. The less attention I attracted, the more unexpected the truth would be when it finally surfaced. The sealed envelope I carried on my birthday wasn't filled with accusations. It contained copies of the documents, carefully organized, along with one handwritten note. You had 16 years to tell me the truth. Today, I'll let the truth speak for itself. That was my entire plan. No shouting. No revenge fueled by rage. Just undeniable proof, delivered at the exact moment she believed she had complete control. The third knock echoed through the house, and every sound seemed to disappear with it. My mother still held the sealed envelope in one hand, her expression caught somewhere between irritation and uncertainty. She hadn't opened it yet. She assumed whatever was inside could wait. The knock came again. I stepped aside without a word. When she pulled the front door open, the color drained from her face so quickly it was almost imperceptible. Standing on the porch was the man from the photographs, the same steady eyes, the same quiet posture, only older. He wasn't there to argue. He wasn't there to demand anything. He simply held a worn folder in his hands and looked at me first. "Happy birthday, son." No one moved. My aunt slowly covered her mouth, realizing before anyone else what those words meant. My younger cousin looked from him to me, then back to my mother, waiting for someone to deny what was unfolding. Instead, I gently took the envelope from my mother's trembling fingers, opened it myself, and placed the documents across the dining table one by one. Certified records, returned letters, court filings. Every page fit together like pieces of a puzzle that had been hidden for 16 years. She reached for the first letter, but stopped halfway. She recognized the handwriting. For the first time in my life, she had no explanation ready, no carefully rehearsed story. No one accused her. No one raised a voice. The silence carried more weight than any argument ever could. I picked up the 3 bills she had thrown at me and laid them neatly beside the stack of evidence. You said this was enough to start my life, I said quietly. The truth is worth much more. Then I walked out the front door, not alone this time, but beside the father who had never stopped looking for me. Behind us, the house remained perfectly silent. For the first time in 16 years, it was the lies, not me, that had been left behind. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. There were no dramatic confrontations, no neighbors gathering outside the house, and no public spectacle. Truth rarely arrives with fireworks. More often, it settles into people's minds until they can no longer ignore it. My aunt called first. Her voice shook as she apologized for staying silent all those years. She admitted there had always been pieces of the story that never felt right, but she had convinced herself it wasn't her place to interfere. Hearing those words didn't erase the past, but they reminded me how easily silence can protect the wrong person. Other relatives reacted differently. Some avoided me out of embarrassment, realizing they had repeated my mother's version of events without ever questioning it. Others reached out not with excuses but with honest regret. Trust wasn't rebuilt overnight, and I didn't pretend it could be. My mother's reputation changed in ways no argument could have achieved. The people who had believed her for years now had the same documents I did. No one needed my opinion. The evidence spoke for itself, and that made it impossible to dismiss as anger or revenge. As for me, I stopped measuring my worth through someone else's rejection. For years, I believed I had been abandoned because I wasn't worth staying for. Learning the truth didn't magically heal every scar, but it removed the weight I had carried since childhood. If there's a reason this story matters, it's because many people grow up believing the version of themselves that someone else creates. They accept blame they never earned, shame they never deserved, and limits that were never truly theirs. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving another person wrong. It's finally giving yourself permission to believe you were never the mistake. A year has passed since my 16th birthday, and I've learned that peace doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, in ordinary moments that once seemed impossible. A birthday dinner where no one insults me. A phone call from my father that doesn't begin with an apology, but with, "How was your day?" A house where silence no longer feels like punishment. My father and I are still catching up on 16 lost years. We can't replace the memories that were stolen from us, but we can create new ones with honesty instead of fear. Some conversations are awkward, others are unexpectedly easy, yet every one of them reminds me that family isn't built by lies. It's built by showing up, even after life has done its worst. As for my mother, I don't spend my days waiting for an apology anymore. Whether she ever accepts responsibility is her choice, not my burden. Carrying resentment would only keep me tied to the person I worked so hard to leave behind. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be for my own peace, not to erase what happened. The future finally feels like something I get to choose. I'm finishing school, planning for college, and thinking about the kind of man I want to become. Not someone driven by revenge, but someone guided by truth, patience, and quiet strength. Looking back, I realize my greatest victory was never exposing a lie. It was refusing to let that lie define who I would become. Because in the end, the most powerful revenge isn't watching someone else's world fall apart. It's walking into your own future with nothing left to prove and everything left to live for.